everyone! I'm here today to do a spoiler discussion on the book Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. I have done a non-spoiler review, which I will link on the screen and in the description if you have not read this book. I do highly recommend it. So go watch my non-spoiler review to hear more details about it, but I do highly recommend it. But if you have read this book, please stay tuned and let's discuss all of our thoughts and emotions on this book. So first off, I'm going to say I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it and hated it at the same time. We have a love-hate relationship. It's probably one of my favorite books of the year so far. But at the same time, it was so emotionally damaging and such an emotional roller coaster. At times, it was so painful to read. It's hard to say that I enjoyed parts of this book. Like, it was just so painful. And if obviously you're watching this, you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. But let's get into spoilers. So first off, I want to talk about Ridge. Ridge and I definitely have a love-hate relationship, but at the beginning, I really loved him. I thought he was so funny, and the fact that he is deaf, this sounds terrible, but it made him all the more attractive. And it was so interesting to read about him and read from his point of view because I've never read about a character that's deaf. And also the fact that he plays guitar and writes music. Oh my gosh, I love that about him. I love that about his character. I think it made him very unique and very likable. Sydney, I liked Sydney. I really don't have any complaints with Sydney. I thought she was an interesting character, not super unique. I thought she was okay. I enjoyed her character, but I did not expect Ridge to be deaf. Like, I did not see that coming, and at first I thought he was joking with her whenever he told her, but whenever he wasn't joking, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so cute. But like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with Ridge because in the middle of the book, I got so angry with him, so angry, mostly because, I mean, I mentioned this on Goodreads and someone commented saying that I shouldn't be angry with Ridge because Sydney had just as much fault in this whole cheating situation. And I agree, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the fact that he straight up told Sydney that he would never break up with Maggie, which tore my heart out. Whenever he said that, that is one point that I started sobbing, is whenever he said that he would never leave Maggie. And I didn't understand it. I mean, obviously we didn't know yet about her illness and all of that, but like, I just didn't get it. And it really, really broke my heart when he said that. And then he continuously flirted with Sydney. And he was almost, I mean, in my opinion, he started a lot of the flirting while Sydney really tried to keep it platonic. Ridge really got all like, oh my gosh, let me touch your throat so I can hear you singing. And I understand, you know, some of those experiences he's never had before because he was deaf and Sydney's right there. But like, I felt like Ridge was really, really pushing the flirting. He, like, at one point they were texting and he had told Sydney about maybe why their band was named Sounds of Cedar, or something else about maybe why he's never spoken. And so he texted Sydney saying, "Oh, now you need to tell me one of your deepest dark secrets." And I was like, that is so flirting. Like, please stop flirting with her like that. Just things like that. And I'm like, you can't tell the girl that you're never gonna break up with the girl that you're with now, but I'm gonna keep flirting with you. And I don't know. I know Sydney flirted back at times, but that part of the book, that middle part, was just so frustrating for me. And then of course, we find out about Maggie and her illness, which just made it all the more difficult because you're like, oh my god, poor Maggie, and she is actually really sweet and really nice and a fun person to be around, a fun character. You find this out about her? Oh my god, I was torn in so many directions because then I started to understand where Ridge was coming from. I mean, the girl was dying. Like, he wasn't going to break up with her for Sydney. He wasn't going to do that to her because in his mind, like, that was the right thing to do. I mentioned this in my non-spoiler review, but I've never read a book that had to do really with cheating, and if I had known that before going into this book, I probably would have been hesitant to read it because, I don't know, that's just something I feel really strongly about. I'm glad I read this book because I think it was a really, like, a realistic view, and it really dealt with all of the complications that come along with that situation. But at the same time, it was really hard to enjoy it, especially the kiss between Sydney and Ridge. I couldn't enjoy it. I mean, one half of me was like, oh my gosh, they're kissing, yes, like I want them to be together. And then the other half of me is like, but he has a girlfriend. He has a girlfriend. So I could not enjoy it. I was upset most of the time because he had Maggie, you know, in the background. So now let's talk about page 266. This page broke me. Like, I literally sobbed for about 5 minutes after reading this page. If you have the book, go flip to page 266. But it's whenever Ridge speaks for the first time to Sydney. He's like essentially not like breaking up with her, but telling her that she needs to leave. And the first thing he says is her name, Sydney. So at that point, I just started crying. And then the next thing he says is, I don't speak well. And I lost it. I lost it. I lost it. I was like, oh my god, this is so sad. And this is the time that he's picking to speak for the first time in however many years. Is at this point in time whenever he's essentially not breaking up with her because they weren't together, leaving her and telling her that she needs to leave. Tears. Tears. I will never regret you. Oh my god. Oh my god. I stayed on this page for about 10 minutes because I could not get control of myself and get control of my emotions. That tore my heart apart. Like, oh, so painful. So painful. And if you cried during that part, let me know in the comments so I don't feel alone. But overall, I really love how it ended. It had a happy ending, and I needed a happy ending. At some points, I was afraid that he was going to stay with Maggie and it was going to end with Sydney being by herself or moving along or finding someone else at the end. I was afraid that was going to happen, but I'm so glad that Maggie was the one who broke up with Ridge. I had a feeling that was going to happen because Maggie seems like that sort of very independent person, so I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen later on in the book. Oh my gosh. And then at the same time though, I was worried. I was like, you know, Ridge and Sydney can't get back together. Like, they can't get together right after that because Ridge is just going to be like torn apart. And like Sydney says, she doesn't want to feel like second place. She doesn't want to feel like the second choice, which I completely understand. And so I was all heartbroken over that. And when they had their little scene together, whenever he came knocking at her door and he like drew all over her, and oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. The feels. But I'm really glad, you know, he gave her time, and then we had the cute little scene at the bar whenever he sang her the songs. Oh, it was just so romantic, and I'm really happy it ended up that way, and that letter that he wrote her was just beautiful. Oh, I was crying the whole time, and I'm just so glad we had a happy ending because my emotions could not deal with it. If there was a different ending, if it was not happy, I probably would give this book like 2 or 3 stars because it was just so emotionally damaging. But I'm so glad that my emotions got to mend and I got to put my heart back together by the end of the book, and it turned out alright. But I just found this book to be so unique. I mean, with, you know, 2 girls and 1 guy love triangle nearly almost was just, it was tough. It was tough. And whenever Maggie found those messages on Ridge's computer, I almost died. I almost died. I'm like, oh my god, how is this going to happen? How is this going to play out? It was just crazy. This book put me in such a big book hangover. Like, I couldn't even think about reading another book after reading this book. I didn't pick up another book until about 4 or 5 days after I finished this book because it left such an impact on me, and the characters just stuck with me. And then they had the soundtrack that goes along with the book, so I was listening to that constantly after reading the book and crying every time Maybe Someday came on. Just some other side notes. I think it's really interesting how majority of this book takes place in the apartment. We have a few little scenes like when they went to the club or they went and got birthday cake that were out of the apartment, but most of the book took place in the apartment. But I didn't mind. Like, it was still amazing, and I think that just shows how amazing of a writer Colleen Hoover is, that all you need is just an apartment and you will have an amazing, heartbreaking, lovely, romantic story at the same time. Yeah, overall I love this book a lot, but it was very painful to read. So if you agree with anything I said, let me know in the comments. If there are any other topics you want to bring up or some things that you've thought of that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments and we can fangirl / talk about this book. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time. Bye.